I'm the king of the world.
Hold it.
I'm pretty.
Hold it. You're not that pretty.
I'm a bad man.
Wait.
That's a bad man.
He is a bad, bad man.
You're a bad man. You're a very bad man.
But in the end, you have saved face because you have recognized officially who the baddest man happens to be. Now you go ahead and
Can I get an amen?
Welcome to the Bad Men Podcast. We're taking mailbag, and I'm here with just Michael.
What's up, guys?
All right, so first question, we have the March Madness tourney going on, and Rock Chalk Jordan was wondering how much weight do the poor performances of college studs Jabari Parker, Andrew Wiggins, and Marcus Smart in the NCAA's tournament have on their pro stock / potential, if any at all? So what's your take?
Well, I think first off, I think it's maybe a little bit, we get a little excited about it, but that said, they hold weight. I mean, I'm not gonna say there isn't anything to it. I think there's, teams. It's a big game. You have to take let's put it this way. There's gonna be more weight on one of those games than there would on any single game in the regular college season. Obviously.
Absolutely.
That's a given.
Yeah, and it's tough because they only have one shot. I mean, it's not like it's a 7-game series. If you mess up once, that's it. And
so it's an inherently small sample size,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of a dangerous thing to put too much weight on.
I mean, you think about 2011 Celtics. I think it might have been 2010, where the Chicago Bulls were just kind of like an upstart team. And they were the 8th seed. Celtics were the first. And they lost that first game. That could have ended their playoff run. Right there. If this were, it's what makes the tournament so exciting. It's what sort of turns people on to the NFL, and it is fun. But especially for these one and done guys, it can be tough. It can be stressful, and it can. I won't. You can't put too much stock on it, but I'm not gonna pretend like it doesn't matter. Andrew Wiggins came out and put up 4 points on 1 for 6 shooting, and he's young, and that's not all on him. But it does sort of bring into question. It does further reiterate that he's a project, and we sort of knew that coming in. I mean, he came in with so much hype. But nobody was expecting him to put up Durant or Michael Beasley type numbers. And he's going to take some work in the NBA, and there's some question marks, and there's some bust potential there. And I think it might not have been as evident before the college season started. But, none of these guys are surefire franchise changers. The way that we might have expected them to be before the college season started. Yeah,
and I still like this draft a lot. Just in general, I think it's almost as good a year as any for a team to tank or whatever you want to call it. Because sure, there might not be one Anthony Davis, but you have 5 or 6 guys who that top 5 is about as good as we've seen in a while.
Absolutely.
Even though there's been a little disappointment, so like. Look at Charlotte and what they had when in their situation when they tanked for Anthony Davis. They ended up with Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. I mean, that's sure you don't have that Anthony Davis, but you also have a little bit of a kind of like a security in a sense, knowing that if you don't get number 1, you're still going to get a player roughly just as good, and still, frankly, should be these should be all-star players most likely. Most of these guys.
There is a bit of a safety net. And I think everyone knows who follows these players closely enough if you draft Andrew Wiggins, you're going to need a point guard next to him. And Nadir Tharp also had a pretty terrible game. And so Andrew Wiggins might not be like as forceful as he should be, but I mean, there's so many variables around him, and he's not a LeBron James, and I think people need to spell that, because there was this huge article that came out of Jabari Parker talking about how he was the best high school player since LeBron, and then Wiggins wins over Jabari, and I mean, Wiggins was the most hyped player going into college since LeBron. So people kind of have to dispel that and understand that Wiggins is a different kind of player. So if he does go to a team like the Nuggets or maybe the Cavaliers or some other team that has a good point guard, I think he could still thrive. And from what it seems, he's currently number one on most GM's draft boards. So it obviously didn't have too big an effect.
Right, and I think, you know, as a fan, for a lot of fans at least, it's more fun to be able to put all this weight on this game and say, all right, this is, you know, it all comes down to this. You know, is Wiggins going to be, you know, Michael Jordan, or is he going to be, you know, is he going to bust before even entering the league? I mean,
right.
It's more fun to put all the weight on it as a fan. But if you're a GM or a scout, you know, you're going to look at things in more detail, more perspective, more context, and you're going to see that, you know, there's some things going on that were affecting Wiggins' play, and obviously there's been a lot of talk about, you know, Bill Self's system and how it isn't really built for, you know, showcasing one guy. So there's that, and there, like you mentioned, there was the point guard play in this last game that seemed to kind of restrain Wiggins a little bit from being able to kind of take things into his own hands. So there's some things, and GMs are going to look at this stuff. They're not going to. I don't think Wiggins is going to drop because of this. I mean, he's especially after what he did in the latter portion of the college, this college year.
And it also helped that the top guys like Jabari. I mean,
nobody else
like
really
Jabari,
overshot him. Really, you know.
Yeah, out of the big three guys, I mean, Embiid didn't even play. I mean, especially with how injury prone these big guys have been as of recent past. Embiid having back problems at this stage has really hurt his draft stock. Where at one point
it's still
I think
the most upside, but yeah, there's
he was kind of the consensus guy. Yeah, he was the number one guy by widening margin, and that's I think that his draft stock has tumbled. Risen. I mean, he was thought to maybe be a lottery pick based off potential, and then he sort of blew everyone away. But his has gone through sort of the biggest roller coaster there, where, I mean, he's still a likely top 3 pick, but yeah, I mean, whereas once he was the number one guy, undoubtedly.
Right, and I think from what I understand, his back problems aren't anything too bad. Like, it's not like I think he was supposed to be back for one of these next games.
He was apparently supposed to be back for the following game if they made it that far, but they got ousted in the second round. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, it's not. I mean, I don't know. I'm not too sure on the specifics of the injury, but based on that, you know, there's worse things that can happen to a big man. But obviously, going into the draft, that's something, you know, that's especially with the history of recent big men and that realm of the draft, it attaches some risk to him, and it makes it a lot when you have a guy like Parker and even guys like Exum and Smart, who are maybe not, they certainly don't have the upside, but they still have a really nice floor, and they still look to be very good players. So there's not a huge drop off from Embiid to those guys, and when you attach the injury to Embiid, it makes him a little less. It's a little harder to pull the trigger on drafting him, I think. But he'll probably still go top 3, definitely top 5, unless something comes up in the meantime.
And Marcus Smart really didn't have, by his standards, he didn't have too bad a game. I mean, they lost in the first round, which is obviously a problem. But he put up 23 points, 13 rebounds, 7 assists, 6 steals. He got a block.
Free throw line a lot.
He went to the free throw line
missed
19 times. Yeah, he missed 7 free throws out of 19, and went 5 for 14 from the field. But his efficiency's always been kind of a problem, and people think that he'll push past that. So that's always kind of been an issue with him, and I don't think that this game will really affect his stock all that much.
No, I think most of the things that this game showed for him were stuff that we've already seen all season from him. It's nothing. There's nothing really out of the ordinary in this game, I don't think. I mean, the only thing I mean, you would have liked to have seen him, I guess, lead the team to a win, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure if his stock's really going to change much. I don't really see any of these. I don't really see any of these guys moving from. I don't think there's a GM that would move these guys on their board based on this tournament. Even though, I mean, just because, Wiggins, he was a little more of a no-show than you would like, but
he came up with 4 points. Yeah, I would say that for sure.
Yeah, but then Parker also wasn't exactly blowing anybody away either. So there's just no one really. If you're going to drop Wiggins, let's say someone drops Wiggins, was Parker really good enough to make you do that, or even?
And that's the thing. Yeah. I think that if this were, I mean, this is a really good draft. But if you did have that guy who, like an Anthony Davis, then I think it would hold more weight. But because everyone, I mean, Wiggins got to the second round as opposed to Jabari or Marcus Smart, and Embiid didn't even play. So I don't think that it'll have too huge an effect just for that reason. As far as their pro careers, do you think this means anything? Like, do you think this is telling at all?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think there's just it's just too different of a game.
Yeah.
From one game to the other, and also just the the way the game is played, B, their actual teams and the way their teams play, and there's too many examples of guys where it's rare that the way you see a player in college is exactly the kind of player they are in the NBA, and that's because the game is different and it's gonna affect their game in different ways. And Wiggins, for example, there's, it's kind of, I think it's kind of accepted that his tools will help him a lot in the NBA as far as his athleticism and being able to get out and transition more and kind of get, take advantage of the spacing that they're going to find in the NBA. And I think he maybe more than anybody is probably going to surprise people with how good he is, especially the people who are doubting him. I think they're going to be surprised, depending on which team he gets drafted by. But I think
he needs a point guard.
Yeah, I mean, there's, even if he goes to a team like Philly, Michael Carter-Williams isn't too bad.
I mean, they have a decent point guard there. So
I mean, there's a lot of let's put it this way: any point guard on whatever team he's on is going to be a lot better than Tharp was for him in Kansas.
Right. So. Yeah, I'm still pretty high on Wiggins. I mean, it does show you that he's a project, but I think we always knew that. I don't think that this really has much of an effect on Jabari. I think that he might struggle a little bit in his first year, but I think he'll develop into a pretty good scorer. Marcus Smart, kind of this whole year, it might bring in some question marks just because one of his big problems last year was that he did deal with some inefficiency. The people thought he would grow out of it, but he didn't really improve much this year. So that might be something to watch out for. Yeah. I pretty much agree with that. I mean, I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised by this draft. I mean, I think we kind of got a little too high on it at first, and I think it's kind of swung the other way with a little bit of. Obviously, there's going to be the backlash when these guys have bad games and all that. And when you build something up so much, I mean, it's going to to be tough to live up to.
It's inevitable, yeah. The disappointment's inevitable. So I think it's going to be like I'm excited for the lottery and the draft. But
absolutely, yeah. Okay, so moving away from the NCAA, the Black Mamba asks, which NBA division would have the best starting five? So I think we can just kind of throw out the Eastern Conference there. No
Pretty much.
reason to. There's not going to be anything.
You would have
over
to put the entire East in one team
to
and then
build
put up
something.
against the better West
Uh-huh.
divisions, I think.
Right. So really, it's just down to the Northwest, the Pacific, and the Southwest. In the Northwest, you have Oklahoma City. So I mean, obviously, you pull Kevin Durant, and
Westbrook.
you might stow Westbrook in there, maybe Ibaka, Portland, maybe Aldridge, but then you also
Aldridge
have
is probably the only guy.
Mm-hmm.
Love probably
Right.
beats out Aldridge.
Yeah, Love would be over Aldridge, so we have Durant and Love right now.
I don't see anybody on Denver that I like in this. I mean,
No, Ty Lawson's dealt with too many. I mean, I don't know if we're factoring in injuries.
and he's
but-
not as good as Westbrook either way.
Yeah, even still. Yeah, or Lillard probably.
Right.
Utah, you might.
Yeah.
I don't know. You might stick Derek Favors there, just to offset. I mean,
You need a
he's
center.
yeah, he's not the best. He's not the best center in that division. Pekovic is.
There's not. Yeah.
But Pekovic and Kevin Love can't play together. And
there's
I've seen that.
Kind of a flaw in this Northwest team, unless you wanna go sacrifice some talent and go for fit. You could maybe plug Favors in at center, or you could maybe even try to put Ibaka in like next to Love in the front court somehow or something like that.
So I think we can kind of toss Northwest aside, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to two divisions here. I think. I mean, Northwest is good, but the Pacific is pretty stacked. Southwest is also looking good.
Right. Yeah. So those are really the two divisions that we're gonna go into. Pacific is made up of the LA Clippers. So you have two right there. Blake Griffin, arguably the best power forward in the league, and Chris Paul is the consensus best point guard. So those two guys you put on the team. Golden State, Steph Curry is the second best, and I'd say probably a top 6 or 7 player in the league. I'm higher on him than a lot of other people are. You put him at 2, maybe.
You could do that. I think in general with the Pacific, if you're looking at the 2 spot, it's hard to find a true shooting guard. So you're probably gonna have to kind of do like a Phoenix Suns thing and use 2 point guards, which is feasible depending on. I mean, you got a guy like Curry who he almost plays like a 2, other than the fact that he's got a lot of point skills as well. But he could,
he can play off ball.
He can play off the ball, and Chris Paul and Curry is kind of like a scary thought,
Absolutely. So I think we've got 3 positions filled. Our center.
Need a center and a
Center would be maybe either Boogie or Bogut.
Yeah, I think if we're taking Griffin, I know he's not the flashiest guy, but I like Bogut actually.
You'd probably pick Bogut for fit.
I'd probably do that. I think that's the kind of guy you'd want around a bunch of stars to kind of bring the front court defense together.
Definitely. So all right, so you got those guys, and then small forward, you got kind of have a hole right there.
Yeah, that's the weak spot.
I'd probably go Iggy from Golden State.
He's not going to
Rudy Gay.
He's not going to hurt your team, and he's going to defend well. He's going to be able to move the ball well.
One of the big problems that the Golden State Warriors are having right now is that Mark Jackson is having a tough time integrating 2 ball handlers into the lineup. So Steph Curry he's the point guard, so he's going to have the ball in his hands, and he needs the ball in his hands. But so does Iggy. And then you have Chris Paul, who's sort of learned to step away a little bit, but he's still he's still the point guard of this team. He's still fairly ball dominant. And then Blake Griffin, who absolutely needs the ball in his hands. That would be a tough dynamic to work.
Yeah, that would be. You need the right kind of coach for that. I mean, though, you need. Maybe Greg Popovich can coach this team. Although I don't know if we're picking coaches, because then in that case, the Southwest is going to have the best coach in the league too.
Absolutely. But, yeah. Let's go into the Southwest now. So, Southwest is made up of San Antonio, Houston, Memphis, Dallas, and New Orleans. So, San Antonio, you have You might take Tony Parker and Tim Duncan. Those guys are on reserve. New Orleans. Do you take? Okay, so you have Dirk and Anthony Davis. And Tim Duncan, if you consider him a power forward. I don't know where you go there. I think I might take Dirk, actually.
Yeah, if I'm building, if I want a team that's going to win right now, I would. I mean, as good as Davis is, I actually would go with Dirk. But I mean, obviously, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with either of those guys. But
and
I
then
think,
Houston, yeah, absolutely, agreed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so flip a coin, but yeah, I would lean Dirk.
And then, I mean, Houston, and this is almost unfair at this point, because Houston has best shooting guard in the league and the best center. So, and then Memphis has the second best center in the league. Or, I mean, you could make it an argument for Noah.
You could maybe even argue Gasol over Dwight. I mean, I like Gasol a lot. I'm a big Gasol fan.
You could take Gasol over Dwight.
Especially if you imagine Gasol and Dirk front court. That's, I don't know. I almost like the sound of that more than I like, Dwight and Dirk. Not that wouldn't be pretty crazy too, but
I mean, you have so much to work with here.
There's some more. It's a little more kind of like a sexy little fit with these guys. I mean. Pacific, this doesn't really mesh very well.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
All right. So just for entertainment's sake, let's take. Are we taking Tony Parker for the point guard slot?
Yeah, I mean Tony Parker up against Houston's not going to compete.
Mike Conley would be the only other guy,
I guess. But yeah, so it's Parker.
Okay, so Tony Parker, James. I don't think we have to discuss that. James Harden's number 2.
Sure.
Okay, so then let's skip to 4 just because we haven't talked about the 3.
Yeah, the 3 is an interesting position. I mean, you have two guys that are very different players, but are probably pretty close to equal talent-wise with Kawhi and Parsons.
Yeah. So that's San Antonio and Houston. I think he'd take Kawhi. I think that he's a better player overall, and he's gotten his jump shot back. He sort of started the year off shaky.
Yeah, and he's one of those players, he doesn't need the ball. And Parsons doesn't need the ball, but he's obviously, you're going to want to incorporate him as a ball handler.
And he doesn't play the sort of defense that Kawhi does. But I sort of wonder sometimes, how good would Parsons be had he started his career on the Spurs? Not to say that Houston's a bad landing spot for him. I think it's been great for him, obviously. But would Kawhi have been the player that he is today had he started off in a different situation that wasn't like... I mean, he got drafted by the Ivy League of NBA teams.
Their player development is
insane,
incomparable,
unprecedented.
So it's an interesting thing. Or you think about... I thought about what about a guy like Paul George or something like that? Obviously, he's almost got a similar skill to Kawhi, but he's got a little more to him than just Kawhi's basically like the perfect 3-and-D kind of guy.
Paul George is I've always felt like after the
he'd be much more efficient.
After
Paul George's efficiency is in question now.
Definitely.
Put him on San Antonio where they can kind of get him to take the right shots and get him good shots all the time. I mean, that's what you kind of wonder that about Kawhi, and you imagine how would Kawhi do on certain teams. I like him a lot as a player, but yeah, it's an interesting. I think it's like, we may never know about some of these guys, or even think about what about Tony Parker? How would he have played out on a different team, or even Tim Duncan?
I think Tim Duncan would have been a great wherever he went, but you take the second to last pick in the draft in Monty Ginobili, Tony Parker, who was pretty raw coming in. And so, but still,
at the end of the day, it helps. It's going to help
absolutely.
any player.
But for the purposes of this, I think you take Kawhi over Parsons, no question.
He's a nice. If you're talking about a team full of superstars, I think you would want Kawhi just because he doesn't need the attention, or he doesn't need no one's going to be looking at him, admiring his good looks like Parsons would, and that might get the other guys jealous.
All right.
It might make Dirk.
You don't want to cause distress in the team,
Yeah, it's just a distraction.
Oh yeah. You
Kawhi,
can't,
Kawhi's a
have
handsome
that.
guy. Don't get me wrong.
All right. But
So yeah,
you know what? I'm taking Kawhi regardless of the team around him.
sure. We'll go with that.
Yeah. So if we had if we were talking about maybe not the Sixers, but if we're talking about building a team from scratch, I'm taking Kawhi over whoever. Okay, so then we have Tony Parker, James Harden, Kawhi. Then kind of take your pick of Timmy, Anthony Davis, or Dirk. You can't really go wrong. Yeah, I mean you can't really go wrong.
Who would you take at the 5 first? Actually, would you take Dwight or Gasol or Duncan? Who would you take?
Gasol. Not to say. I mean I think Dwight's the best in the league, but I think that Gasol can really. I mean he's probably the best passing big in the league. Maybe
he does everything well.
Absolutely. Yeah, he doesn't have any holes.
He hits free throws too, so that's kind of a nice little advantage over Dwight.
So I think I mean Southwest kind of came and ran with it. I think.
Yeah. Who would you put at power forward next to Gasol though? Would you go Dirk still or Davis?
Yeah,
Davis and Gasol
Duncan's out of it.
Either way,
Davis and Gasol would be crazy, but
so would
Dirk is so efficient. And Gasol provides the defense, and you already have the defense in Kawhi and Gasol. I think that you could
kind of overkill with Davis, probably.
Yeah. I think you'd take Dirk. I would take Dirk. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. I like that team a lot.
All right. So this last question of ours has been highly requested. And I mean, it hasn't been covered on ESPN or anything, but I'm sure it'll come to light soon. And it comes to us from Cal Turk, and we've been asked a number of times. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized Blake Griffins or one Blake Griffin-sized duck? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lose-lose. I mean, you're gonna have trouble either way. I think it kind of depends. I mean, here's something. Like, do you have any weapons at your disposal, or are you just going hand to hand?
You have your fists. Those are the only weapons I need.
I mean, I guess how fast can you kick? Might have.
I don't know. I don't like to go fancy
you can
like
maybe
that.
handle. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a big Blake Griffin's a big guy, so that'd be a big duck.
Huge duck. I'm just thinking like, if the Blake Griffins are all like as strong as he is, just in this sort of pint-sized package, or would it be in kind of relative to his size? I mean, that's still pretty strong, and he has a huge vertical.
Would it be like the way ants can lift like 100 times their weight? It'd be kind of like that.
That's what I mean.
You'd probably get overrun. You'd probably get overrun by all those.
I mean, this question is really haunted me and kept me up at night. But I think that I would take Blake Griffin sized duck, because then like their legs are weak. Just kick them out from under them.
Yeah, you're gonna have some physical advantages there. You won't have the size advantage, but you'll have some other physical advantages.
So I think this is pretty open and shut.
Yeah, I don't know. I might actually go the other way. I might actually say I'll take my chances with the 100 Blake Griffins, or either the duck size Blake. I mean, I just feel like I would be more confident knowing that I'm much bigger than them.
And you don't know what you're up against a full size duck. So
yeah, I mean those things. That beak is gonna hurt. If they get that beak on you.
Definitely. Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be in next week answering more very important questions. Take care.